evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Eileen Cosby. I manage the historical collections here at the library. And I see some familiar faces, but if you haven't been to the history room, it's up on the 3rd floor. Our brochure is over on the table. We're not open as much as the library. We're open about 20 hours a week. But we do, during that period, we help people with research. And you can use the collections in our beautiful reading room. We do have, actually, I wanted to announce this new genealogy program that I got funding for. So we're having a professional genealogist come in twice a month, and the brochure is over there. So it's on first Tuesdays, and then in the middle of the month there's a Wednesday slot where the first genealogist is Iris Mary Alicia Flores, and she is bilingual and can help people with general, getting started with your research, getting your research together, but she's also a specialist in Puerto Rican, Caribbean, and South and Central American sources. And then on Wednesdays, Hilary Shao, who has a lot of experience running genealogy labs at other libraries and has taught here for us, has taught classes, she's going to be coming in one Wednesday a month. And I can see people here who have already been to that yesterday and got a lot of help. And she's great at helping you get organized and get your family tree up and running. And so feel free to take advantage of that. I've got can continue it through May, but I'm hoping it will kind of expand into a genealogy lab where a bunch of people can come in and take advantage of that. So, Bob, before I get any further, restrooms, all important announcement. There are passes on that door back here to your left, and you take a pass and you bring it to the security guard who gives you a key to the restroom, and bring the pass back when you're done. So Bob is locally famous. I don't have to give him too much introduction for his canal tours that you've been doing for 4 years? 5 years?
9 years.
9 years, okay. Time flies. And it's not just the canals anymore. It's neighboring towns, it's reservoirs, it's all over Holyoke. And he researches a lot of that in the history room, by the way. And tonight he's doing what is apparently the second in an annual series of A House in Holyoke Through Time. And he's going to tell you lots about that. He's also planning a third one and has some ideas. I think he'll tell you about how to come up with his third one. And I just want to mention that I do this kind of research for the city or for individuals or for my own research in the history room, a lot of trying to explore a house through all the generations that it's been in Holyoke. And it's a lot of fun. So I encourage you not to let me and Bob have all the fun and come up and research a property of your own. It's especially fun if you don't, if all you want to know is who built it and that information isn't there, it can be frustrating. But if you do what Bob is doing and just go where the sources lead you and put together the whole story of the house, it can be fascinating. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you.
And I'll turn those lights down.
And I'm going to have my friend Tom pass these out to you. And the front is the side that has the title. All right, everyone knows where this house is, right? I hope. It's on the same street as the library. This is the official front door of the library on Chestnut Street. And you go down 2 more blocks from here, and about the middle of that block on the left, this house is there. It's one of 2 houses left on that street, which remember, 150 years ago, most of this segment of Holyoke was residential. But if you look around, it's mostly institutions, businesses. So it's quite a change. Now, if you look at the picture, what do you see that's important? First of all, you're looking from someone else's backyard. And you see Chestnut Street in the middle. This picture is about 1881. So you're looking from another house on Chestnut Street, and that house is going to turn out to be very important. So keep that in mind. And the house is right across the street, but look what's in the back left of it is a carriage house. It's so enormous that it almost looks like another house. And if you look at both of them, they have different architectural styles. And I still don't know if they're built at the same time. And I think that the builder might have been one of two of his brothers. So this is the house of James Newton. It was built for him. He had come to Holyoke in 1864 after being very successful up in Greenfield in Vermont, getting businesses going like tunnels, making railroads safer. And he came to Holyoke wanting to start up businesses. And his first business was a wire mill, then a paper mill, and he kept going and going. Now look at the building itself. That's called a special name. It's a French roof. It's a style called the Second Empire style. And the one in back, though, you don't know the style really. It's maybe a Queen Anne. It's hard to see from that picture. Even when you look at it nowadays, it's hard to determine what it's trying to be. There's a house in back, notice that too. By the picture's date, 1881, his brother, Moses, was living in the house in back. All right, so you see a lot of things here. And look at the supports of the trees. Other pictures from this same series have the same trees around. And so that's their way of trying to get them to grow. All right. And this is the house nowadays, so you don't see too many differences. One small difference is that if you actually look on the very top, you see on the very top of the house, there's something approaching a little porch up there. That is gone. And I didn't realize that until about 2 weeks ago, and I said, how can I determine that when you're close to the house on Chestnut Street, you can't see up there? So I went out to Maple Street, and I was in the back of the parking lot for McDonald's, and I finally could see up there. The black trim that it rests on is still there. So the wood that makes up is gone. And same with the carriage house. You'll find in later slides, the carriage house's very top tower is now gone too. All right, so another thing you might look very careful. Look at this one and compare it to this one, right? Well, one thing is behind a tree, but that window in front to the left of the door, you're going to see on other slides that that's not original either. And another piece that's not original is anything off the wall of this house. So anything from this point, we're going to find out that's not original either. So why did they change it? Because they got different owners, and those owners needed more space. Okay, now, when I finally saw this picture, I said, I've been seeing this house for decades, and I've been seeing the carriage house for decades. But if you put the two together, and it somewhat looks like this one, and look whose house that is. That's the Addams family house, right? And they filmed in this house, but this is the production painting of that house. Every time they went outside, the Addams family, they filmed it outside, but then they had a post-production on that film, and painters would paint in pieces of this house that they wanted to make it look more sinister, right, or more peculiar. And look at the antenna, for instance, it's slanted on top roof, right? This is a real house they filmed in, and it's in the same style, the Second Empire style, right? And if you put the tower from that carriage house, it kind of looks like this. Now, sadly, this actual house was taken down about the 1990s, so it doesn't exist anymore. And I'm pretty sure that the Newton family was not as peculiar as the Addams family. All right, so like Eileen said, I do Holyoke Canal Tour, and I have my own website, and I do parks and streets, and I've done South Hadley and Holyoke for 9 years now, and Chicopee for 3 years. And I always make a centerpiece as a canal inside those communities. And I'm always sponsored by Holyoke Preservation Trust, and I'm paid by Holyoke Local Cultural Council. Okay, and this is also a Holyoke 150th event. They've had about 30 events. One big one was the gala. Another big one was the Holyoke City Hall dedication. Another big one coming up is Holyoke Historic Nutcracker. It's in December 16th. So look out for that.
Can I interrupt a little bit?
Yes.
We actually do a Nutcracker preview here at the library. So Saturday.
Oh, you had it last year, yeah.
So right out here in the main floor, they do a 20-minute full costume music version of the Nutcracker. Right here by the steps, so this December 2nd.
In the same group, it's the Massachusetts Academy of
It's the
Ballet.
Massachusetts Academy, yes, because they are performing in Springfield, they like to have it somehow previewed in Holyoke.
So when I saw this year, I right away said, this is horrible. Holyoke Historic Nutcracker at the Pope Francis Preparatory School of Springfield, right? Which is, okay, it's a former Holyoke Catholic and Cathedral together, but I right away emailed the person that does this. I say, any way of getting this back to Holyoke? And he said, if you can find a way, I'll do it right away. Next year, of course. And there's going to be a book release, a time capsule, so forth. So there's still events going on this year. I have other sponsors. And I have a charity every year, and this year is a Holyoke merry-go-round. I always try to pick a place that helps the children of Holyoke the most. All right, and when you think of this presentation, think, does it deserve to be fixed up? Because if you walk by it someday and you look on the sides of it, try to figure out in your own mind, what does it deserve to be fixed up? Does it deserve a Community Preservation Act grant? They give out $500,000 of money a year that's matched by the state, and I wish they do this place. All right, and also, when I do this next year, it'll be called third annual, but I don't want to select this house myself. I want someone in Holyoke who owns a house that's older than 100 years old next year to send me an email and tell me, I want my house done. Because, and then they're going to tell me in a paragraph, it has a nice architecture or it has a good history. If I'm going to wait 2 months from today, and then I'll choose one. If I get 10 people, I'll just do basic research, trying to figure out the best one, and then I'll select one. The reason why someone in Holyoke Preservation Trust says, you have to be more democratic in your houses, you're picking the beautiful house and the best institutions, and there's all kinds of other people around, and that's correct. So if you want me to do something like that for you, my card is over there, got my email, and you can tell your neighbors, you can tell your friends, anyone in Holyoke that owns that house can send in an entry. It'll be free. And I won't go in the house either. It's just the outside and the people that live there. Okay? Yes, go ahead.
To be a house, not a...
Ooh, yes, because
To be a residence?
if it's an apartment complex, it's just too much. I wouldn't know what to do. It'd be so vast. If it's a business, I actually want another series going on called The Mills in Holyoke. So I'd rather have it just one house. Okay, like Eileen says, I do a lot of research here, and many of you do too. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to do is the architecture, the plans of the house. And this person here, David Tower, and his brother, Ashley Tower, they came to Holyoke 1867. Almost every mill in Holyoke was designed by one of those two brothers, David Tower or Ashley Tower. All the ones that are gone also, they did most of the architectural designs for the mills. And that's because the Newton brothers became friends with the Tower brothers, and they got them involved in all their work. And so when you look at a mill, most likely if that mill is made post 1867, this person probably did it. Okay, and one of James Newton's two other brothers, Daniel or John, probably made the house. They were both contractors full-time. Right? Now, those two statements are the only two statements that I cannot prove. I wish I could say that for sure. Okay, now look at this map. Look at the year. And the house itself is right there. J.H. Newton. Okay, that's the house. And they don't depict any carriage houses, so the carriage house might be there by now. But look at all those houses. If you count them up, there's 45 of them. All right, now, if you go out there today or tomorrow and try to find these, how many will you find? You find one, for sure. If you know the street very well, you know that the house next to it is also original. So there's two. So at 45 on the whole map, there's two. One more, there's a funeral home right here that's original. And guess what? That's it. Everything else on that map has been taken down and replaced with something else along the way, usually a very long time ago, right? For instance, this is the parsonage, the first parsonage, which means rectory for St. Jerome's Church, right? That's been taken down. This is workers, managers' houses for the Lyman Mills. That's gone. This is the Victory Theater now. So for good reasons, they were taken down to put something up better. And that's what a downtown is going to be like. Most of it's going to be gone. And this is true about downtown and the flats in South Holyoke, but every other neighborhood, the buildings are still there. Okay, so we got our first sketch, 1884 Sanborn map. And this is what the old house looked like. It's what that first picture looked like. And you notice it's a box, and it got one porch and one window on this old one, and a carriage house. All right, it's important to try to remember what this looks like, because I'm going to go to 5 more years of Sanborn maps, 1884 Sanborn maps, and we're going to look at the house on the next slide. And this is a carriage house, and the reason why I'm showing you this is because it most assuredly lost its top, and this is a modern picture of the carriage house. The very tippy top is gone. But you know that it probably had it on the top of the back carriage house. So there have been changes along the way. Now, 1884 to 1889, is there any difference? Well, I'll go through them. This one and this one. Is there difference? Already there's difference, right? Look on the side, left side of the house, right? And also right side of the back. So you got a difference. You got a little piece right here. And we know that because look at this. And if you look at the year 1889, James Newton is still the owner of the house, but he has now 4 children, and he probably is building bedrooms out there. So this is one big change. Okay, and we're going to look at another one, 1895. Do you see any difference besides it colored in? No. All right, but James Newton is still there. Still has only 4 children. He has grandchildren now living in there, but only by that year maybe just 1. Okay, now a big change. So look at here, and 20 years later, what's happened? Well, first of all, the carriage house changes too. It says pool room, that means billiards room. There's a big middle section from the house to the pool room that's been added, right? You see that? And also in the very back, there seems to be storage rooms. Well, there's a new owner now. In 1910, the family moves away, and in that year, they got a new owner called the Holyoke Club, which is a very exclusive club for rich mill owners around Holyoke. And what do? They add these big sections because they want this to be their club, which has a billiards hall. And then this portion in the middle is, very simple, a dining room. And what do they put in the basement of that dining room? They put a bowling alley. Okay, so that's 1915. And you can actually see the dining room in back here. It's still there. It doesn't look like a dining room anymore. Probably the kids' room now. So that's that portion right in the middle. Okay, and this is 1949. Any differences from this one to this one? No. And the reason why it has a third owner and the last owner ever has, and that's in the year 1919, it's got the third owner and they're still there. But they never change it. So everything there is still there. One change, maybe they got rid of their billiards room because now it becomes the Holyoke Day Nursery. And then the last one of all, 1956, still no changes. They don't need to make changes. Okay, so that's the architecture of the house, and this is the Newton family, but it's before any of the brothers move to Holyoke. 1860, Thanksgiving Day in Greenfield. These are some of the Newton family. The parents of the brothers are up there, but there's James Newton. He's the one that moves into, or has his house built for himself, probably in the year 1868. John becomes a contractor and moves to Holyoke and builds many mills and other buildings. Daniel probably builds in Holyoke alone 200 buildings, many of them mills, right? And if you include the other places around Western Massachusetts that he built, probably 300 total buildings are made by Daniel, usually very large mills. All right, then lastly, Moses is the fourth brother that stays in Holyoke, and he lives behind James, his brother, and he starts up paper mills too. Okay, and this picture shows 6 brothers coming to Holyoke. That's true, but only 4 stay. 2 other brothers move back up to Greenfield. One becomes a preacher, and the other one just becomes a carpenter. Okay, so most important person to us is James Newton. There's a picture. He seems to be getting richer and richer. And why? Because he might come and start up with paper mills, but he seems to be getting richer and richer and older. Now, make sure you look at a picture carefully. Look at his mustache, right? Reason why? I'm showing you pictures of him through age. The mustache. So if you look at this picture, which one of the 2 is him? Probably. The left one, probably, right? They're both very tall guys. Now, where is it taken?
Is that from the house?
No. You're in it.
Oh, library.
It's a library. It's the old part of the library, probably. It's on the side of the library, probably the park side of the library. And that's important because he was a major benefactor to get the library going. Okay, and some of his mills that he kept, and that's key, that he kept, are the Warrigon, the Norman, the Massachusetts Screw Company, and another one that's on the very top, the biggest of all, is the Chemical Paper Company. These are the 4 he kept. And the key word is, what else did he do? Well, he financed a lot of other mills around Holyoke with his brother Daniel. And they were instrumental in creating probably a total of 30 of the 80 mills that were ever around Holyoke. And what they did, they either financed the mills, and they did that in the case of for alpaca and of the Skinner mill, or they started up a mill and then sold it, or they just built the mill off of the design they were given. That was Daniel Newton doing that. The building you see right in the front here is a storage house for the Warrigon, and it's still there. So they were makers of paper mostly, but they also made wires. They made cardboard boxes. They made wooden screws, and they had a lumber yard. So they did a lot. But he didn't stay doing that. His brothers did, but out of the 4 brothers that stayed in Holyoke, he then switched over to starting up banks. And that was about around 1895. He switched over. His sons were old enough. He gave each one of his sons jobs that were at a very high level in one of his mills. And then he went to becoming a banker. And he started from scratch 2 banks, the Home National Bank and the Mechanics Savings Bank, from scratch. All right. He also was the president of the People's Savings Bank and the president of the Hadley Falls Bank. So he moved into these directions while still owning the mills. Okay, now, the back of your sheet. And why did I do this? If a person lived in that house, I wanted to represent to you that they're part of this family tree and they lived in the house. The last generation which are some of the grandchildren of James Newton. I only put 3 because those are the only 3 that lived in the house. Okay, so James Newton on top. You notice his wife dies in 1900 of kidney problem and of a heart problem. And he remarries, and I put his second wife down in the corner, Emily Norcross. And I have pictures of both of them. I'm only going to show you Susan Taft's picture. But he has 4 children, right? And I'll talk about each of those and what they did around Holyoke. And then he had 3 grandchildren that lived in the house. In fact, he had about 12 total grandchildren. Okay, so this was his wife. And she lived in Worcester, and I've always wondered how he would have known that she existed if she's out in Worcester. But remember, he's a mill owner going all over western and central Massachusetts. One of his brothers, Moses Newton, at that point was living in Worcester, and so he probably met Susan Taft there. Right, and they had 4 children, and then in 1910, his life changed drastically. He moved up to his house that he was getting built, and it's still there on the Pinehurst Road. That road did not exist when he was alive. His driveway went from Northampton Street to the other side of the house, of this house. So if you go up to this house nowadays and you can sneak a peek in there like I tried to do here, it's well set back. But if you look at it, you'll say to yourself, oh, that's the front of the house. But keep walking around up Pinehurst Street till you can see the back of the house, and then all of a sudden you're going to realize the back of the house is where the front of the house is, really, because the driveway came in to the back, and the biggest entry by far, and a grand entrance, is in the back. So what you see from the front on Pinehurst Street is not the front of the house. And he was the owner of every bit of land in the western part of the neighborhood of Oakdale. Right? The Allen family was the owner of almost all the land in the eastern part of Oakdale. But he owned the western part. And he noticed that the Allen family was selling off lots and building them up. And so he decided to build up his land that he had bought, and the new streets were put in, including all the streets in Oakdale that are on the western side of Northampton Street. They were all his property. But one important thing that was on his land was the Holyoke Hospital. And when the Holyoke Hospital came around, I think 1890 it came around, he owned the land already, and he said Holyoke needs a hospital for anyone that's not Catholic, because there's already the Providence Hospital. So he gave the land to Holyoke Hospital for free. Okay, 1921 he dies, and his stone is way in the back of Forest Hill. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the 3 sons and the 1 daughter, and what did they do? All right, and look what Edward, he's a manager at the Warrigon. So they're taking jobs in the mill that the father has started up. All right, and notice the year about 1887, and they develop. By 1895, James Newton leaves the mill sections and starts up banks. So his sons are probably very good at running the mills themselves. All right, notice where Edward lives. Same street, except a little bit closer to Veterans Park. And then, where does he move? Well, when he gets married, he lives at 164 Chestnut Street. When he starts having kids, he moves up to Pinehurst Road, across the street from where his father's living. And he lived in the house that I showed to the right there. It's also pretty big and very hard to get pictures of because it's very set back again. Okay, and he had 3 sons, and these are the sons. And even the sons start off with jobs in the mills, but then they move onward to other jobs into other states. Okay, now he had,
Yeah, I'm getting a little hung up on the name of Taft. His wife's name was Taft.
Susan
There
Taft.
was a president named Taft.
Oh, yeah.
How did his middle name become Taft?
Oh, his middle,
Yeah, Edward Taft Newton. What?
yeah, right here. Okay. In the American Protestant tradition of naming children, from 200 years ago and up to about maybe 80 years ago, the tradition was that you name the first name and last name are basic. You choose a first name and you get the given last name. But the middle name usually comes from the other sides of the family. So Susan Taft was his mother, and a lot of American Protestants took that name and used it as the middle name for one of the child. All right, another one of the family, in fact, Susan Taft's mother had another last maiden name, and that maiden name would go to another one of the children. All right, it's too bad that tradition is gone. You know, it's a wonderful tradition because it makes for great names.
Yeah, and it carries on the family.
Yes, very much so.
Was Susan Taft related to E.C. Taft?
As far as I know, no. I've never seen that. I made her tree, but I didn't see that name.
He owned the Albion.
Oh, yes, yes. They they own other things. Yes, you're right. Edward Taft, I think his name was.
Yeah, I'm not positive, but
Yes. So that's correct. I think that was her brother. So it was James Newton's brother-in-law, and they had a lot of projects around. Yes.
he's the guy that owns the castle.
The castle too, yeah. And James Newton helped him finance and construct that because he got his brothers constructed and he financed it for him. So yes.
Probably related. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Thomas. Okay, so one more question.
My wife's old Protestant family, and she continued on with what had been going on before.
Oh, excellent.
Those naming patterns still persist.
Yeah.
I gave my daughter the name Tanya Holyoke.
Oh, good.
I was living in California then.
Wow.
No clue I would be. Holyoke.
That's wonderful.
He just happened to be an old name that was prominent from the
Really?
East that had
Wow.
been in their family.
Yeah, my uncle was Edward Holyoke Nichols. Somebody else was Edward Holyoke.
And your son was,
Another one, but you know,
your son was also had
a different
a
name.
different
But
family name.
yeah, so it was fun to come to the history room here and learn that it is the same family. My goodness.
That's wonderful. I wish more people would do it.
Yeah.
You know, some people know about it, but most people have forgotten about
When I had a
tradition.
last name like Ward, I had to do something a little unusual.
Yes. Okay. So, the first son was Edward. The third son and the last child was James Bertrand Newton, and he he stays in the house when he gets married. So he gets married in 1904. The same year that his father gets remarried, James, his son, marries and stays in the house and starts to have children. Right? So the house is getting filled up. And actually, they stay in that house, I think, a year longer than the father who moved out in 1909. All right, now I'm only going to list three of the five children because only three of them actually lived in that house. But most importantly, after that house, he briefly moved up to Pinehurst Road with his brother Edward, and then he moved down to Oak Street. And on Oak Street, there's one very nicely built block called the Fairmont Square. It's between Cabot and Hampshire Street. And on it are 12 buildings that are quite nice compared to the rest of Oak Street. And he lived in the second one on the right, which is depicted here. And sadly, that tree was in the way no matter what I did. All right, that's 245 Oak Street. And his sister, Eliza, who's very hard to find information about, she moved constantly with him. So no matter where he went, she moved with him, right? And she lived to 1945, and she was the last inhabitant of that house. Okay, now, you have that brother, James Bertrand Newton, and he had 3 children that lived in the house, 5 total. And these are the 3 that lived in the house. So he had James and Richard, and these are the Holyoke High School yearbook photographs of his 2 sons, right? And you notice Hildegard, I couldn't find her in the high school yearbook, but most rich families sent their daughters off to private schools, whereas the sons usually went to public schools. All right, now there's one son that is so different from the other 2, right, that is very unusual because he starts out in a bank, then he starts going into paper mills, becomes a manager there, and then he's the treasurer of one of the Newton's mills. And then, 1902, he owns a gold mine in Vermont. What is he doing? And there's a rumor that I found about James Newton. He was very rich from the 1860s to the 1890s. And then there's a rumor that in the late 1890s, all of a sudden he lost a lot of his money. And I can't figure out why. He started up these banks in 1895, and then there's a rumor by the late 1890s, he's lost a lot of money. And maybe he started up too many banks too quickly, or maybe he tried to finance this gold mine in Vermont for his son. Is there gold in Vermont? No one says there's gold in Vermont.
You had up to then the largest financial setback in, 1895 or so, when, like the Great Depression, a lot of people were overextended. They were in deep trouble at that point.
In 1895, there was a second biggest depression in American history. So that could have caused it too. But I'm a little suspicious, why was James Newton, this guy, the richest guy in Holyoke, all of a sudden it's rumored to have lost a lot of money, and his son has a gold mine in Vermont, and then in 1904 I find that same son out in San Diego owning a gold mine, right? And he dies in 1906. He's the president of another gold mine in Mesa Grande. What happened? I think that they just bought out a mine that people thought was gold, which wasn't. Quite possible. Okay, and the neighbors, they're very important. The one that's at 167 the house is still there, and he was the undertaker. A lot of funeral homes seem to have very long lives. I don't know why. Across the street, there used to be a very important house, and we'll talk about that soon. And the next resident, 1910, the next resident is not a person, it's an institution. And the institution is the Holyoke Club. Right, started in Holyoke 1904, where I'm going to show you the house, it's right there. The Holyoke Club started in the Joseph Clark Parsons home, which was across from the modern home of the Victory Theater. It was taken down to make the Knights of Columbus across from the Victory Theater. Even that was burned. So this is a house that was there and was the first place for the Holyoke Club, a very exclusive place. And notice one of the officers, Albert Magna. Do you recognize that name? Cars. Dealer, yeah. Yeah. Albert Magna's father-in-law owned a certain hill called Crafts Hill. And 100 years ago, Albert Magna's father-in-law gave that hill to Holyoke as a gift. and it's nowadays called Anniversary Hill and Scott's Tower. So his father, Walter Scott, his father-in-law, Walter Scott, gave a big gift to Holyoke in 1923. Okay, so they owned it from 1910 and they sold it in 1919, right? Why did they go out of existence? Not that they moved, they just went out of existence. In 1917, they went out of existence. And the reason why is very subtle, because there was something called American Renaissance from about 1870 to about 1917. Some people call it the Gilded Age. This is where rich people were taking advantage of their great wealth and living a grand life. But the great hit of 1917 was the United States joined World War I, and it was horrible to look like you're spending lots of money where all the men in the United States, young men, are going to Europe to fight a war. That effectively ended the American Renaissance. And you didn't want to seem rich. Okay, now this was the start date of the Holyoke Day Nursery. The Holyoke Club finally moves out. There's one last thing that they do, and that's in the year 1918. It becomes a service club for a few months for returning veterans of World War I. Okay, and then the last institution starts up. And this institution, the Guild of St. Agnes, was started up by this man. He started one in Worcester that was extremely successful. He wanted a daycare for young children because the mothers had to work in the mills. And he got his money his own. He got a guild coming out of the St. Jerome's Church of Holyoke to start what he had also started in Worcester. Right, his name was Daniel Tully, and this is him. And he would die in 1932, but he started up one of the most successful locations in Holyoke. Okay, and the way he did it was he got the money, the charity from the people around Holyoke, right? He got the Sisters of Providence to be in control of the building. They had one building on Chestnut Street, one building on Dwight Street, and they would move to this building on Chestnut Street. So a lot of things were going on. They had a guild there, which arranged the activities, and they had the sisters there, and they were running a daycare with that. Now, notice 1916 he started up in Holyoke. 1919 they moved into 159 Chestnut Street. Where were they for 3 years? Well, the only reason I'm showing this picture, this is Providence Hospital. This is Providence Hospital. This white building is a school it's a home for rookie nurses, nurses trying to be full-time nurses. This yellow house in the middle is the first Holyoke Day Nursery. For 3 years, they were in that building, 1916 and 1919, right? So this is one of the few pictures that exist of that day nursery in the beginning. Okay, and this is Daniel Tully, buried in, I think, Millbury, Massachusetts, right? Now, something very subtle is happening. I'm trying to be really careful because the St. Agnes Guild is a group that is running the whole place, and Father Tully's getting the donations. All right. When they move into the house in 1919, they name it the St. Agnes Home, and they ask the Sisters of Providence to be the caretakers of the children that will be there. Okay, but also it's not only a daycare; it's also a guild. It's home for the guild, and it's also a convent for one nun at a time. One nun always stays there, has a supervisor and she sleeps overnight. All right, and a very subtle thing happens in 1934 that from now on they call that building the Holyoke Day Nursery. So in 1934, something very subtle happens, and we'll keep that year in mind, okay? And it happens to be 2 years after Father Tully dies. Okay, Now, the St. Agnes Guild, it goes out of existence. I can't find it much, but in the 1950s and 60s, it resurrects itself in its own building. And that's great. They're a charitable organization. The Sisters of Providence, this year is 150th anniversary of their existence in Holyoke. And they ended up forming a new order in Holyoke of their own in 1891. And this is their first head of the Sisters of Providence. And this is their major convent, but that St. Agnes home is one of their convents too, because one nun lives there. Okay, now I'm going to start showing you some of the children. All right, it's hard to see on some of the pictures, but some are excellent. Okay, this is a 1920 picture. They just moved in, and they're asking, can you give us charity? And this is a 1920 picture also. And this is 1981. And my mother told me this once. Mothers in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s used to go shopping with their baby carriage, leave the baby carriage with the baby outside the store they were shopping at, go shopping for an hour, come back, and they would have their kid there. No one would ever do that nowadays, but that's what this is saying. Baby carriage are lined up outside in the walk. All right, this is them probably in that dining room. This is one of their graduations. And this is an assistant program with Holyoke Community College. And this is really cool. It's so good, I'm going to divide up the 3 pictures so you can see it better. But this is a 1953 series of pictures in the Holyoke transcript showing some of the children in the Holyoke Day Nursery. All right, now, so what I did, I cut it in 3 because some of these kids, you want to see up close, what they're doing, and you read about them. They're not all from Holyoke. They're from Chicopee, Granby, South Hadley, East Hampton, so forth. All right, now, my favorite slide is the next one, because look at this guy up here. He's on the telephone, right? So I wanted to figure out, did this guy, when he was growing up, ever work for a telephone company? So his name is Bill Matlack, and he's still alive. And as best I could tell, I kept looking for his name, and he never worked for a telephone company, sadly. All right, and you have sister and brother down here. Okay, and this is the last part. Now, what I did, I took Bill Matlock plus 7 other people at random, and I tried to figure out if they're still alive. So 8 people total, and 4 of them are still alive, and 4 are not alive. But you would probably expect that from 1953 to now. Okay, now every one of the superiors worked at the Holyoke Day Nursery. And look what happened from 1934 to 1949. There's no one there, right? But that was the point at which they changed it to being called only the Holyoke Day Nursery, and no other names were associated with it. Something happened in that year, right? The guild was no longer in there. Supposedly, there was no longer a nun that stayed overnight there either. And they used only this name from now on, instead of other names. But all these 7 lived in that house. And this is one of the nuns, the last one. That's Dorothy Young. Okay? Okay, so what happened in 1934? And this is incredible. You always think that the Catholic Church is going to win every argument, right? If a church is coming down, they're going to get it down. If there's anything they should own, they'll own it. Well, it turns out in 1975, there was a court case between the Springfield Catholic Diocese and the Holyoke Day Nursery. The Springfield Diocese says, we own it. The Holyoke Day Nursery says, no, you don't. Right? And they went through the deeds, and they went through the language, and what happened was that the person that started up in such a way that it was independent from the Catholic Church. And so they wrote it out that way. And I think the big changeover was very important. In 1934, they probably started up a board of directors that was independent of any religious people. And from 1934 onwards, they ran it using religious people, but on the board they had non-religious types. And so when the court case came up, they saw how it was set up, the deed in the beginning, and I've seen the deed on the internet, and it says, owner, Holyoke Day Nursery. It does not say, on every other case, if you find a deed for a church, it'll say Springfield Catholic Diocese, or it'll say Bishop of Springfield, or say something like that. This one said Holyoke Day Nursery. So that first person set it up that way, and so they won out. Okay, so this is the building, and I've run out of time. I have about... All right, but remember what I told you. If you have anyone that has a home that's 100 years old next year or more, tell them about it and tell them to send me information about the house, and I'll go through them and choose one of those houses. All right. Also, sometime this month or next month, go to the home on the sides of it and look at the side and tell me if it needs work. Yes. Okay. It needs work, and it hasn't been getting that work. It's been run off of federal money since 1975. It hasn't been run off of charities anymore. And so they get a certain amount, and that amount doesn't seem to be enough to do repairs. But the Community Preservation Act might help greatly on a very nice house. Okay, any questions?
Are they looking to put some of the original details back?
Ooh, there will be some, no. There are people on the City Council of Holyoke that it always goes through the members of the Community Preservation Act, and they approve it or disapprove it. But then it always goes to the City Council. And there's members of the City Council that in the past, on CPA grant money, has said, no, you can't put whole-scale infrastructures on there. You can only do small repairs to get it up to snuff or to change the inside a little bit. And these people are very strong. In fact, they tried twice this year to get rid of the CPA. And his members have said you cannot have infrastructure changes on a massive scale. So what you said...
Talking about restoring it to the way it was.
The City Council will knock that down right away. I would love that, you would love that, but as a practical thing, the City Council of Holyoke would knock that down. All right, it deserves it. And the reason why, they think that on private property, private home, private business, that sure, you can do small things with CPA, but don't do big things, or we'll knock it down. And they've said that before. So what you're saying is great, but I don't think it'll get through.
Does that apply to the Victory?
What, say it again?
Does that apply to the Victory Theater?
Oh,
Looks
but
like they're giving them...
I don't think they've ever given money. He tried. Oh, tiny things, murals, yes, very small things.
Not this past year, though.
Yeah, they probably would never support, CPA would never support the Victory itself.
Yeah,
Okay. Small things, yes.
So you're saying that the CPA, the rules from the state might allow such historic preservation. You're just saying that there's not quite the right will
Yeah,
from the people.
I'm sure that the rules on the CPA of Holyoke and on Massachusetts probably would allow it. But you have to get these things through the final say, which is City Council. And they vocally, I think it was about 3 years ago, they said on one matter, private homes, why are you making these wholesale changes on our money? And up to this year, they've been trying to even knock down CPA to not exist, or down to a lower level.
Yeah, I just read something about the Victory Theater, architects and whatnot. What's going on with that?
That's another program, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, yesterday I think he announced that the architects and the contractors are getting together for a second time, probably today, at some point, and they're supposed to, I don't know, start something. But
What's their funding? What's going on with their funding?
when they get all their money, and they get what's called tax credits. These aren't what you think they are. It's not real money yet.
Yeah.
And even when, say that they somehow can build a thing, and you have these tax credit things, and it says $10 million on it, and you try to sell it, now you can take these tax credit and sell it to a person that's paying taxes and they want to reduce their taxes. But when you try to sell them off, they only sell for about half price. So even if the whole thing is made, I don't know how he's going to finance that construction, you know.
Okay, thanks for that.
And I don't want to say too much because I think he's doing too much.
Didn't a similar thing went through in Pittsfield eventually? It's probably a combination of state money and other things that has to come together, and it's a lot of money, so who knows?
Yes. I mean, it'd be wonderful if it happens, but
Yeah, that historic tax credit device was used and was helpful in getting this addition to the Holyoke Public Library. And I was on part of the board at that time, and it worked, but it was very complicated with a lot of lawyers and a lot of layers, and I think there was like a 7-year process of stepping off of it, and I mean, yeah, maybe we couldn't have done it without it, so we had to do those things, but
You may not know that this is a private
it's not easy to
institution.
understand or to
Yeah.
explain how the historic tax credits work. But-
so the library's run as a private institution, like Forbes is too.
Right.
Yeah.
The library is a private endowed institution, but in partnership with the city, so we already have complexities in terms of the administration of the library. And then there were complexities. I remember one of the lawyers on the library board, when he's figuring out what the lawyers who are helping with this are getting paid, he's thinking, oh my goodness.
Nice going.
Okay. Any more? Thomas?
Newton Brothers' father up in Greenfield, what business was he in?
He was just a farmer.
Oh, he was?
Yeah. And they all those brothers I've been talking about, those 4 that became mill owners or builders, they almost all started as school teachers for like 3 years. And James Newton was a principal of a school in Worcester.
Mill up in Greenfield.
The what?
But they have a lumber mill.
When they were 21, 22, 23 years old, they were all school teachers. And then they started like a lumber yard. They started making tunnels for railroads, for instance, and things like that. And they got wealthy.
They were ambitious, it seems like.
They were very ambitious. I think that Moses Newton, when you read his story of what he did all the time, I asked one of the relatives, was he bipolar? You know, and even the granddaughter said probably. He did too much. Okay. Thanks for coming.